Welcome back to High Frontier. This is game number 3, part number 4, which is the Mars tutorial. We just had NASA land on Mars successfully, and they did so by paying for Aqua and basically doing a failure is not an option uh, maneuver, or I guess operation, and they were successfully able to land. One thing that you might have noticed is that we did take an Aqua from LEO in order to pay for that. And you might ask yourself, well, didn't it have to come from the bank? And the question is, why would you be able to use it from LEO? But basically what you need to know is that the failure is not an option move, that the Aqua is used as currency also in this game. It pays for the expertise, software upgrades, modeling, tracking, and other technologies that guides the rocket safely through that hazard. So you're paying extra money. It doesn't matter where it comes from, but you're paying extra money in order to pay all your engineers to make sure that rocket safely lands. And it paid off. So, it worked out for NASA. Anyway, we are pretty much at the end of year 12 here. So the ESA is the only one left to go. And the ESA has 2 cards. And remember, they're pretty much starting over from scratch. So what they're going to do is they're going to take a look and go, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and take this refinery because it's a 4 mass and probably no one's going to bid on it, just so that they can sell it later on. So they get it for free. No one bid on it. All right. Well, that is the end of the 12th year, which means that, guess what? We went through a full cycle. And we are now in year 13, which is year 1 of the second sunspot cycle. And when we go past the red, we take off a red. That means that we really only have, what is that? I guess if you take it off, do you still continue to play? So do we have 12 years left, or do we have 24 years left? Don't know. We'll find out. All right. On to the next year, year 13. And obviously, we've got a whole bunch of stuff here in low Earth orbit. We have one thing in the rocket stack, but what we really need to do is we need more cash here, because we need to fuel this rocket so that we can get this thing off, or basically out of low Earth orbit. So I guess what they're going to do is they're going to take this thruster, figuring no one's going to bid on it, and they were right. So they took this card into their hand. They only have 1 card in their hand now, and they're most likely going to sell that for Aqua. All right. Well, guess what? We're with NASA, and NASA has got a lot of stuff that it needs to do, because it's sitting over here with its rocket on Mars. Its rocket, though, it's a site. It's a number 10 site over there. So it needs 11 thrust in order to take off. And as we see, this rocket is only a 5 thrust rocket. So the thruster, they're going to go ahead and do a free operation, and they're going to decommission this thruster. Basically goes back to their hand. That patent they still own. So they're going to be able to build it again if they want to use that thruster in low Earth orbit. As for the Robonaut, we're going to have to move that rocket out of there, because we don't want a rocket anymore, because, well, we don't have a thruster. So the rocket is removed and an outpost is created. Here's an outpost. So an outpost is created, and the rocket comes back. All the information regarding the rocket is removed. So here's the rocket. The rockets are removed. The wet and the dry mass chits are moved back over to their spots. And this rocket, we can build another one later on. So we created an outpost, and we have a Robonaut that is sitting there. It's not on the rocket stack anymore, so a free action. Remember, you can basically transfer these things with a free action. So we're going to put it here on outpost number 1. So now we have a Robonaut on outpost number 1, which is great. And the Robonaut now can do an actual operation. So in order to do an operation, we need to take a look at what the site is all about. So let's go on over here, and then we're going to focus in on the Mars system and on Mars itself, because that's where this outpost is residing. And it's residing with a Robonaut, and I'll put the card right over here so we can see what the Robonaut is all about. The Robonaut is a buggy, and a buggy is really good for land sites that have yellow dashes between the sites. Why? Because a buggy can prospect all of the connecting sites in one move. So a buggy is great. Now, what you need to look at for prospecting, and I know there's a shadow there, so let's see if I can get this a little bit better. There we go. The prospecting, you need to look at the ISRU number. And the ISRU, as mentioned in a previous video, is the In Situ Research Unit. It basically extracts resources from the local environment, which is living off the land. So it's not being imported from Earth, but we're going to go ahead and use the ISRU value of this buggy to determine whether or not it can prospect. And for ISRU, a lower number is better. Why? Because your ISRU needs to be equal to or less than the number of water droplets that are on the site. So as we can see, these 3 sites have water droplets in the counts of 3, 4, and 4. And the ISRU of this buggy is 3. So this buggy can prospect all 3 of these sites simultaneously. It has the power to be able to do that. Now, in order to prospect, you have to look at the number that's on the site itself. All these numbers on these sites are 10. What you need to do is you need to roll a D6. And if you roll that number or lower, then you actually successfully prospect the site. Now, as these 3 sites are 10, I'm going to roll lower than a 10 for sure on a 6-sided die. And I'll just roll it. There we go. I got a 6. That's less than 10. So, bam. All 3 sites are successfully prospected. Isn't that great? So, on our outpost, we have prospected it. On the North Pole, we prospected it. And on the other site, which is named, let's see what it says. What is the name of that? It is Helios Basin. We're going to go ahead and we're going to successfully prospect that site. Each of those claims, we've claimed that as NASA's sites. Each of those claims are worth points at the end of the game. So that was extremely valuable to do. Having that buggy was great. Having it be a 3 was great. and not a 4 because they've only been able to prospect one site. So fantastic. It's a very good move for NASA, and we'll put the Robonaut in the outpost, and NASA is sitting very pretty right now with 3 claimed sites on Mars. Now, the next turn, or the next few turns, is going to be trying to get in that refinery out there, so it can build a factory, and that's using the industrialized operation, and that's going to allow for a colony. So more points, definitely more points. So anyway, that's what NASA did, and the Hellas Basin buried glaciers is the other site, and the North Pole, and of course the caves where we landed. All right, so the next person to go is the ESA, and the ESA desperately needs money, and so it does exactly what we thought it was going to do. It takes this refinery here, the magma electrolysis, and then just basically does a free market operation. We'll put this underneath there, and it gets 3 aqua for its troubles. All right, good sell, and that's the end for that. So NASA's claim of all 3 sites is potentially a game-winning play, unless the other players can find a way to get there real quick. It looks like that NASA is going to win. One thing to mention about those prospecting actions is a buggy can do what we just did, which is prospect multiple sites at one turn. But let's just say you're on a planet or something, or a site that has one site. Well, what it can do is if it fails the first roll, it can roll again. So you can get 2 chances at it. And if you don't roll underneath the equal to or underneath the value, well, that's really bad. You actually, that claim site is busted. And that's pretty bad. So, because you can't prospect there again. Once it's busted, you can't prospect again. So a buggy is really good for that. Other ones that are really good is a ray gun. So let's see. Does anyone have a ray gun? I don't think anyone has a ray gun. If somebody gets a ray gun, then the ray gun can actually prospect multiple sites from orbit. So, for example, if somebody's rocket was here and they had a ray gun Robonaut, they could prospect both of these sites, as long as it was an ISRU value of 0. Is that true, or is it actually the number? I apologize. Start over. So if someone's rocket was here and they had a ray gun, then they would be able to prospect both of these sites here, and then roll the die, and then at that point they would be able to see whether or not they can get ones on those to prospect both, to claim both of them. So with a ray gun, you can do multiple from orbit. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up this year. And so we're going to go on to year number 14. Year number 14, we're going to move the chit over here. I'll just pull this thing up. We'll move the chit to year number 2 of the second cycle, which is year 14. And we're going to focus on the taikonauts. So the Taikonauts, this player decided to decommission 2 cards in Leo to his hand. Both the CVD modding refinery, this one, and the Cat Fusion Z Pinch Robonaut, this one here. So they decommissioned those back into their hand, and for that was a free action. You can always do that and basically transfer it. And then what they did is they free marketed the refinery here, sold it for 3. So they got rid of their refinery, and they got 3 aqua for it. So they're getting some cash. All right, 3 more aqua. This one goes back over here, and this one goes there. Okay. That was the Taikonauts. NASA says, all right, well, I need some cash, so I'm going to go ahead and put this thruster up here. It's another solar thruster, and puts it up for auction, and puts it up for 0. And the Taikonauts bid 1 for it, and NASA said, fine, go ahead and take it. So the Taikonauts got themselves another thruster, and they ended up paying NASA the $1 for the patent. An aqua. So NASA got themselves an aqua, and the ESA, all they did was just take an aqua as an income operation. And that was that year. So moving on, year number 3. Year number 3 of the cycle, the Taikonauts sold the other patent of the Cat Fusion Z Pitch Torch Roundabout Robonaut. That one, the one they took out of the LEO, they sold that one for 3 aqua. So they're amassing some cash. Now they've got 6 over there, plus the 1 in Leo. NASA took an income operation for 1 aqua. And the ESA auctions the tungsten retrojet Robonaut, and they bid 0, and NASA wanted it too and bid 1, and so ESA bid 1, and they won the Robonaut. So they got themselves another Robonaut, and they're paying 1 aqua for it to the bank because they were the one who put it up for auction. So one tip to notice here is that you can only have 2 output posts at the end of your turn. So if you'll notice here on these cards, you only have 2 outposts. Here's 1 and 2. And if you want to do another outpost, well, you're going to have to decommission 1 outpost in order to build another. So you can only have 2 at the end of your turn at any time. One other tip they said is that notice the indecision that's going on over here with the Taikonauts. They have 4 thrusters. They're all over the place. They haven't gone anywhere. They haven't even ever built a rocket. So what they said is the Taikonauts are being undone by indecision here. In year 12, recall, they boosted 2 cards up to Leo, and that took cash. And then they decommissioned them. So they're really wasting turns, and that's really what their undoing is here. Could have been, they said, a person who didn't really understand the game very well, and we can see that clearly. There are definitely some better moves being taken by these 2 factions rather than that one. So yeah, another tip is that when they took that solar sail there, they said for a round trip to Mars, the photon kite sail is of little use because it has 0 thrust and relies on solar radiation, which will diminish as Mars is approached. With a sail's very low thrust, any rocket with a weight class of transport or greater will likely have net 0 thrust or lower. This means sails are limited in the mass of cargo they can move at any one time, but they can be decommissioned and cheaply boosted again to save on return trips. Yeah, because their mass is 0. So if you can get there, that's really good. One more thing to mention about the in situ research unit. They said that well water can be extracted from the icy core of a small world by injecting steam into a well hole. Water extraction from an anhydrous world with water in the form of hydrated silicates or as tiny ice crystals in the regolith is more challenging. Crushed matter is sealed in a vessel and heated to 700 Kelvin with steam at 1 atmosphere of pressure. The vapor is removed and cooled to 280 Kelvin to separate solids and gases. The liquid water, some of which is recycled to the first step, is outgassed briefly in a vacuum to remove dissolved gases and placed in storage. Assuming 4% water content in 70% of the top 2 meters of regolith, 4 tons of regolith must be scavenged to obtain 120 kilograms per day of water. In 1 year, a single game water tank is extracted from an excavated volume of about 1,100 meters cubed. So in other words, about 24 by 24 meters by 2 meters deep. Wow. So a single game turn, they're basically excavating, what is that? That's like 75 feet by 75 feet by just over 6 feet deep. And then that will give them enough water to basically live. So they are definitely living off the land over there with their ISRU in that outpost. They're not living high on the hog, in other words. So, all right. So realizing that, we're going to go to year number 16, which is year number 4 here, 13, 14, 15, 16. And realizing that their sale is worthless, they go ahead and they sell it. So they're going to sell that, and they're going to receive 3 aqua for that patent. And here's the aqua, 1, 2, 3. All right. They got a bunch of aqua over there now. And hopefully, he doesn't really see any legitimate chance of industrializing Mars at this stage of the game, but it's trying to make a play for the Mars Glory chit, which is out there You can see it right at the top of the screen there, that little orangish circle. That's the glory chit. Like I said, once you land on there with the crew, you can claim that thing and then bring it back home for two victory points. So what he does is he takes a free action to create a rocket with the solar moth thruster and the crew, and he puts his rocket on the Leo space and stacks a wet and dry mass chit on the one space of the fuel strip. So you can see right now that they've got themselves a thruster over here, and this thruster is a what is it? It's a solar moth. This one here, the solar moth thruster, along with his crew. And this thruster was not on the rocket thing, by the way. That just moved over there. It's still in Leo. So he's going to do two of these guys here, and does a free action, which is to create a rocket. And the free action is called well, it doesn't really say. It's just a free action to create the rocket. So there you go. Free action creates the rocket. It has one mass, just the crew itself, and puts his rocket over here, just off Earth, onto Leo. So finally, they have a rocket, and their rocket right now is a mass of 1. They have no aqua in it, so they have wet and dry, both on the one spot. Okay. So they made themselves a rocket, which is nice. NASA goes ahead and auctions this Robonaut here from the card stack with a 5 mass, figuring no one's going to take that. No one's going to bid on it, and they were right. So now they have 2 cards in their hand. And the ESA said, well, I can do that too. I only have 3 cards in my hand. So I'm going to take a look at this refinery here with a 4 mass, and I'm going to go ahead and auction that off, and they take that at a 0 cost. So now they've got 4 cards in their hand over here. All right. Well, that's the end of year number 16. So we'll go to year number 17, and the Taikonauts free markets the Hall effect thruster over here in Leo. Which must not have been in Leo. This thing had to have been, I guess, down in his hand, because it said it was in his hand, for 3 aquas. So free markets it and receives 3 more aquas for it. So now they have quite a bit of aquas going on. All right. That's the free market. Now, what they did was they converted 8 aquas to fuel. That is also a free action. So they paid out 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They paid out 8. 1, 2, 3. I'll just put them over on the side over there. 5, 6, 7, 8. And by doing that, we need to move the wet mass of the rocket up 8 steps. So we go follow the red dotted line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that puts it on the 9 spot. All right. Calculating the net thrust. So the cards in the rocket stack, the net thrust of this rocket is a 3 base minus 1 for the transport because of the weight. You'll see that there. And so now they're down to a 2 net thrust. They can only make 2 burns per turn. Which isn't great, but it is enough in order to make that journey. There are 2 other factors, though, that could have increased the net thrust. Afterburn and the heliocentric zone modifier indicated by the sun on the thrust triangle. However, taikonauts did not choose to afterburn, and the heliocentric zone modifier for Earth is 0. So even though they do have that sun icon there on the thruster, the modifier is 0. And they did not choose to do the afterburn, spending 2 steps of fuel for 1 thrust. So they kept it at 2. It is important, though, to know that those things exist when calculating net thrust, because in other parts of the solar system, the heliocentric zone modifier is not 0. So that will have an effect on it. Now, after doing that, they decided they were the free market that they got for 3 aquas. That actually was an operation that counted as an operation. The solar making that rocket and putting the rocket fuel in it is a free action. So that's cool. So now they can actually move. Remember, so you can do 1 operation and 1 move, and you can do those in any order. So the taikonauts decided to follow the blue route, and in order to do that, they'll need a net thrust of at least 3 for his rocket if they want to make it to the low Mars orbit in 1 move. So what do they decide to do? They look at their icon and they're like, hey, I've got to push that little arrow between the 3 and the 4. I've got a push engine. So I want to use that faction privilege, which is the power sat. So what they did is they try to negotiate with the ESA in order to use that power sat ability right there on that crew card. So it gives them +1 thrust, you see? So they wanted to go ahead and negotiate so they can make it out to the low Mars orbit in one move. And over there is where the low Mars orbit is, way over there, way up there. And they're going to try to take that blue route right there to get into low Mars orbit, but you need 3 burns, as we saw the ESA do earlier. So what they did is they attempted to negotiate to have that power sat use to get that extra point of thrust. And the ESA basically needs money because, remember, that disaster that occurred for them cost them everything. They paid for that 1 aero brake maneuver, and then they didn't pay because they didn't have any more money for the next one, and then they blew up their rocket. It basically crashed and exploded. So, yeah. So what they do is they're like, okay, fine. You know what? I need money. So why don't you just give me this thruster over here, this photon thruster, and we'll be good to go. The photon heliogyro thruster. So they said, okay, we'll go ahead and we'll do that. Actually, what's happened here is these two cards have gotten mixed up. This one here. All right, so they said, sure, we'll go. I'll go ahead and I'll give this to you. So they just gave him this card, and so the ESA said, great, awesome. Now they can do that through negotiation, because even though they had 4 cards and now have 5, it wasn't in an auction. So you can get more cards. You just can't do an auction if you have 4 or more. So yeah. So they went ahead and did that. Now, since they got the power set of ability, that allowed them to be able to basically get an extra point of thrust. So they took it. And so they have an extra point of thrust now. So they're at 3. One reminder, it says the Academia hand limit prevents players with 4 or more cards in hand from initiating or participating in an auction, but doesn't prevent players from obtaining cards in any other way, such as through negotiation. That's exactly what I said. So it was right there at the exact same time where the book said to remind, and I also remind. One tip it says is, be careful if your negotiation includes conditions that extend into future turns. Excuse me. For example, in our example, the ESA said that, okay, you know what? I'll go there, but I will leave the North Pole alone. And the ESA said, okay, but the Taikonauts are under no obligation to actually honor that promise. So after the turn in which it's negotiated, those bets are off. It's only for the turn that it's on. Okay. So the solar moth thruster here consumes 4 steps of fuel per burn. And there are 3 burns along the way. So that's going to be 12 steps. So we already know that. The ESA knows that they can sell that thruster in the future for 3. And that's going to be some easy money just to provide power sat to a person. They felt like it was worth it. The Taikonauts want to get to Mars this turn and also has enough fuel to get back. So, and also have enough fuel to get back. So they also need aquas. So countering, they asked for 1 aqua from ESA for the patent, and ESA countered the counter by mentioning that they thought that NASA is winning the game and would help if CRP would leave the North Pole site on Mars alone for ESA to later claim, assuming the CRP is willing to help with a little espionage. And the Taikonauts said, sure, we agree. So they agreed to do that, and no money changed hands. But the negotiation ended positively, and the Taikonauts gave the thruster to the ESA, but the ESA also then ultimately relented and gave them 1 aqua. So from their pool. So right here, the ESA went and gave the Taikonauts, these guys here, 1 aqua. And then the Taikonauts said, fine, I'll just leave North Pole alone for you. So that was that negotiation. That's how that worked out. the transfer can't be done during movement or in the middle of an operation or a free action, but that isn't a problem here because it's in the middle of nothing. So it worked out just fine. The ESA said, sure, you can use my power sat. So we put a net thrust of 3. And then we're going to go ahead and move that rocket. There we go. All right. So we're going to move this rocket. And we're going to do 3 burns, right? So the first burn is going to be up to the cycler, from LEO to the cycler. This should be very familiar to us by now. And the second one is going to be over to the GEO. And that's the second burn. And then they want to go along the blue. So they're going to go down to the L2 Lagrange point and shoot on over here to this spot, which is the third burn. And then they're going to continue onto the Mars flyby. Probably get even a little bit closer. There we go. So we're going to go down to the Mars flyby, and the Mars flyby provides an extra boost burn, basically an extra burn. So they're going to use the aero brake path and here, and they're going to pay 4 aqua in order to not fail. They don't want to roll. Here's the burn. That's by the flyby. And then they go into low Mars orbit. Now, the rocket now has a wet mass. We're going to go ahead and we're going to calculate or move the wet mass chit down here. We're going to move that thing 12 spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right. So we're down to 4 wet mass. All the burns were paid for by the fuel. The next step the person did was, well, hold on. There's a note. It says, rocket equation. The game evaluates a rocket's wet mass at the beginning of a year's turn, and this mass is assumed to be constant the whole year. In reality, a wet mass constantly changes as it burns fuel, and the rocket equation must be used to accurately obtain the delta V accomplished over the year. This game simplification allows the players to move rockets without resorting to differential equations or calculus. So a simple addition and multiplication and subtraction instead of actually using a differential equation because things are changing on the fly. That's really what differential equations do. They allow you to go between one limit to another limit and figure the difference. So yeah, that was nice of them not to have to include that. So obviously they can't make any more burns. They've already used all that up. But regardless, to do a powered landing on Mars, they need to switch thrusters, and that cannot be done mid-move. So you cannot, once you start with one thruster here and you're moving, you end with that thruster. You can't say, okay, now I'm changing over to use the crew thruster and land on Mars because it's got a higher thruster than what the site is. See, 14 is higher than 10. So I'm going to go ahead and use this. Well, can't do that. Can't do that. Has to use this thruster, and this thruster is not powerful enough. It's only at a 3 right now. Not powerful enough to land on Mars without doing an aero brake. So what they do is, so what they do is they actually stopped their move, and they can do that because that's not a landing site like it is on the moon. See, we had that lander right there on the right by the moon. It's got a lander icon. And on Mars, though, it's the low Mars orbit. So they're just in orbit around Mars, and they're going to use their crew thruster next time in order to burn and to actually land safely on Mars by burning down onto Mars. So we've seen it 3 different ways. One, to pay for the landing, so that expertise and programming and so forth will safely get us down. We saw a person without the programming, and their rocket smashed into the planet, broke up, and this person decided to stop and then use their crew thruster in order to try to land safely next turn. So different ways to try to get to Mars and try to land on it. All right, so NASA's up next. NASA needs funds. It's only got 2, right? But also needs the 2 patents that they have in their hand. So what they're going to do is they want to get back to Mars because those claims are just sitting out there, and they want to turn those claims into factories, and they want to protect the claims from felonies, because if you don't have a crew out there, then somebody else can basically steal your claim. If you have a crew, though, that's impossible. So the problem is that each industrialized operation requires decommissioning a refinery and a robonaut. So they really want to keep that one robonaut that they have in their hand. They want to bring that to Mars so that they can create a factory and decommission it. There's already a robot there, but there's no refinery there, meaning on the outpost on Mars, but there's no refinery. So they can't, so right now can't do an industrialized operation. And to industrialize all 3 claims is going to be very expensive and take a lot of time. So she wants something to sell on the free market. So what she does is she auctions off this robonaut here with a 5 mass. And here's a ray gun. So this is a ray gun 1. So that ray gun can go ahead and basically prospect anywhere where there's water, 1 droplet, actually any kind of droplet, I suppose. But that IRSU value of 1 is pretty good. They can go ahead and prospect a 1 site and be able to try to do that, but they can do multiple from orbit. So they went ahead and they auctioned it off, and nobody was interested. So they got the patent for free. The ESA is really still reeling from that disaster, obviously. And that thruster that they just got from that negotiation, they went ahead and they sold it for 3 because they need cash, because they pretty much lost all their cash in the Mars disaster, they called it. That was in 1970. Because we said that NASA landed in 1976, and that was just what, a turn or two before. So 1974, 75. That was the Mars disaster that the European Union had, I suppose. Well, they weren't the European Union at the time. But the Europeans took a shot at it and didn't quite get there. So they got 3 aquas for that. And we're going to go into the next year number 18. All right. So year number 18, the taikonauts are sitting very, very close to Mars, and they're also carrying a crew. So now they don't expect them to build a factory because their rocket does not include a robonaut. But NASA is nervous about them taking a claim. There's also a glory chit that's out there, like I mentioned before, and they're probably going to get it. So the first thing that the player does is it takes an income operation for 1 aqua. So we'll just put 1 aqua there. It gives them 3. All right. They did their operation. And now it's time for the rocket to make its final approach. So the dry mass still remains at 1 because it's still just 1 for the crew. The wet mass is still at 4. And sticking to his agreement with the ESA, the taikonauts intends to land the rocket on the Hellas Basin Buried Glacier site. All right, let's go over here. The Hellas Basin Glacier site is right there. And as you can see, it's got a site number of 10, which means that there needs to be a net thrust of 11 or greater in order to be able to land there safely. So what they do is, since the new turn, a new move, they go ahead and they activate their crew thruster, which has a 14. So that allows them to be able to do this move. Now, looking at their playmat, if you recall, they were down to 4 wet mass, and that actually puts them in the probe category, which gives them a weight class modifier of +1 to thrust. So in fact, not only 14, but they're at a 15 thrust, which, by the way, I'll show you real quick what I'm talking about over here. The 4 is at a probe level, which is +1 net thrust. And if you look, 15 is the very highest. So they're at the highest they can possibly get. They have the most thrust power of any kind of rocket that they can have. And they kind of need it because they're landing now on Mars and not trying to crash. So they're fighting against Mars gravity, and they have 15 thrust, which is plenty. So the final lander burn, though, look how many steps it cost in fuel. 9 steps. 9 steps. So they went 12 steps of fuel with the other rocket, with the other thruster, and had 12 steps of fuel, 4 times 3 burns. So they go ahead and they use those 9 burns to land on that site. And we're going to go ahead and show those 9 burns being done right here, because that's using up a lot of their fuel. So let's take a look. But since it's so light, it's going to be able to get there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Look at that. So you can see how light it was. It was 9 steps of fuel, but it wasn't that much in order to get that down, because the craft was so extremely light. Before, with all that other, see, that's the key. You put more propellant in the rocket in order to make it go faster and farther, it weighs more. And so it goes slower. That's why the speed of light will never, ever be attained by any type of craft. It's just impossible. Aside from the relativity, it's just impossible. It's impossible to go there, which leads me to the next step and saying that for those who are looking for alien life and so forth out there in the universe and thinking that we can go ahead and travel amongst the stars right now in the form that we're in, I'm telling you, that is impossible. It's an impossibility. The nearest star is so far away. It is like 25 trillion miles away. It would take us so long to get there. And you know what? There's no life form out there. It's just not. It doesn't exist. And for those who believe in aliens and so forth, aliens are not creatures from other planets. Okay, they do not come from a different galaxy. They actually come from a different dimension, and they are supernatural beings, and they are not good. They are malevolent. So if you ever encounter them, you just need to tell them, in Jesus' name, I command you to flee, and they will go. And that is proven. You can check out L.A. Marzulli's channel if you'd like, but that is a proven fact. So for those who wanted to know that kind of stuff, now you know it. For those who didn't, well, you still know it now too. So aliens are not your friends. Let's put it that way. All right, enough of that. But that really kind of explains some of the science behind this as well. So guess what? They landed themselves onto that site, and that worked out pretty well. So we're at a wet mass of 2 1/6, and guess what? China, the Taikonauts, are the first nation to land an actual crew, a human, on the planet Mars. So there you have it. That happened, and the crew is on the planet, and it says that the West is in an uproar. Now, the Taikonauts can use its faction special ability to steal NASA's claim. So the Taikonauts have the faction ability felonious. Your humans may perform felonies, felonious actions, and it's negotiable. Committed a felonious action, and it's not legal if a human is present, such as a colony or a rocket with a crew. But in this case, there was none. So what happens is this claim goes away for NASA and is replaced by a claim by the Taikonauts. Cool. Taikonauts got themselves a claim, and they replaced that chit. They also get the glory chit that's out there for the Mars zone. You can see that out there. So we'll go ahead and take that glory chit. And that glory chit is sitting right there for 1 point. So they got themselves the glory chit for having a human in that zone and landed on a site for the first time. If they return with the crew back to Leo, then they get themselves two points. That chit will turn over and it'll be worth 2 points. So free action is claim jumping. We just did that. The NASA claim is gone, and they got themselves their claim. If the claim is co-located with a factory, or then no, it cannot be done if a human opposed to the claim jump is present on the claim. If the claim is co-located with a factory or a colony, or if the faction committing the felony has run out of claim discs. So if you don't have any claim discs, there are no more. You get 9, and that's all you get. So you can only have 9 claims active at one time. So frustrated by that, NASA says, all right, well, I've got to get out there. So I'm going to go ahead and free market this electron laser here that's got a 5 mass. I'm going to go ahead and free market that for 3 aqua. All right. So they sold it, and they're going to get 3 aqua for that. That brings them to 5. Okay. The ESA is going to go ahead and sell their basalt fiber spinning refinery for 3 aqua on the market as well. So they're going to get 3 more aqua. And that's going to be the end of that year. So we're going to go ahead and switch that over to year number 19. But that's also going to call it for this stream, for this this episode. And we will come back next year with year number 19. So we really got through a bunch of years there. And we also saw our first outpost and claiming, and we also saw our first felony. We also saw the first human to land on Mars. So that's where we're at, and hope you're enjoying this, and we'll see you in the next episode.